So some stragglers coming in. So I've been asked, and I hope you guys take advantage of it. We're Dylan and, well, I think Dylan for sure, anyway, and some of the TopoDOT team are going to be at the gazebo after this. And they'd all like to talk to you a little bit, get your impressions about TopoDOT, about scanning in general, about our sponsors, you know, all good news about the sponsors, by the way. All the one things you love about our sponsors. And then, but just giving your impressions about, you know, your experience here so far and where you're from and things like that. So if you could go to the gazebo afterwards when you're walking by, stop by and share a few words, because we'd like to get to know you, and yes, we'd like to post you and put you on social media. So that's what it's all about. So just don't want to let that go. Okay. So I think we're just about, we'll start on time. Okay, wait till the last few guys are coming in here. Okay. Well, welcome to Tuck. It's how'd the first morning go? Okay. Everybody found the room. Computers worked. All right. Hopefully, you heard a few things, but well, welcome, and we really appreciate having you here. And we want to, you know, basically introduce you to, well, what we've started the last couple of years is a panel discussion. And what we do is we kind of just talk about big picture things. You know, what's affecting you? What are you dealing with? You know, we're not looking for, that's not about finding features and extracting curb lines and things like that now. It's just really like, what about the big picture, about the business, about the data, and in this case will be data and collaboration. So our panelists, and I'll introduce them shortly, have been kind enough to share they're all professionals in the field, and they know a lot more than I do, but because they actually make it happen. So they actually deliver products, they take TopoDOT, they take and other softwares. I know there's none really, but I just say that to be nice. But they take TopoDOT and they take their systems and they actually make deliverables and they extract that value that drives these other processes, other operations. So I have to get my clicker here. So these have been kind enough. So let me introduce, well, let me talk about what we're going to talk about real quickly. We're going to talk about data governance and collaboration. And I'm sure every one of you guys came here thinking about, I got to learn something about data governance collaboration today. Look, data governance, every one of you guys does data governance. If some of you just have, are really organizing your data, getting it set up, using it. Some of you have like 26 hard drives under your desk. You're still doing data governance. You're not doing it well, but you're doing data governance. And it's a really important part because these systems now, in the modern geospatial community, they're pushing out data like crazy, right? And we all know that. It's terabytes, it's petabytes, and so data governance is basically how you organize and use that data and make it useful. So we're going to have some interesting discussions there. And collaboration. The other side is the data just sits there, right? And a lot of data is just sitting there and not being used. So, and the idea is the collaboration, and we're going to talk about is how do you use it internally? How do you access it? How do you share the information that's in that data with your customers, with your clients, either internal, the engineering department, or external, whoever you're doing the services for. So I said, so that's what we're going to talk about today. And this should work, and it's not. Oh, there you go. Okay, wrong button. So let me introduce you to our panelists. We'll start with Christine Gayron. She's a Northeast area manager from GDP Geospatial, and she's just teamed up with Sam. So she kind of jumped in with the big dog, and that's great. Christine has, we were just talking this morning, and she's been in this for 25 years, okay? You're still a youngster by my standards, but you've been around a bit. Russell Hall, to our right, with Langen Engineering, and he's running the mobile mapping, And basically last week we did a Formula One. I don't know if he's doing anything that sexy this year, but that got everybody excited. And then we have Matt Laluzerne, of course, he's National Director of Business Development and Geospatial Services at McKim-Creed. And Matt, they're great TopoDOT users, and they've basically, we've known each other for years, and we run into each other in Dr. Phillips every once in a while. But Matt's really a real leader in this area, and so I think they're all going to have a lot of things to share. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to get to this relatively quickly, because we really want, after you hear from us, we want to kind of open it up to you guys to give your experience, basically some comments. And you'll have Paul Giacobbe, who's going to have the mic, and he's going to get to you guys and kind of solicit. So don't be shy. Okay. Well, let's start with a definition. So I waved my hand about data governance, but here's what it is. And this is from Azure, Microsoft. You can find about 26 definitions, but they all kind of circle around the same thing. It's a collection of processes, policies, roles, metrics, and standards that ensure an effective and efficient use of information. So that's part of that definition. And I'd like to kick this off by asking each one of our guests to talk about their data governance process, your metrics, your standards, how you're handling it, what your challenges might be. So, Christine, you nodded, so I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. Yeah, so to me, we're talking about data governance as it relates to geospatial data. So it's and that to me is any piece of data that has a geographical component. So, it could be, a lot of us are in surveying and mapping and in the engineering industry, but, it could be anything that has a dot on a map and data associated with it. So, so what we do at our company is, well, first of all, there's no hard drives under desks. You're not even allowed to put anything on your C drive at my company. Everything is on a network and everything is backed up. And then the challenges come in when you've got 5 years of large data and the servers are getting filled. So do we just add more storage? Do we archive? And then it's like, that's when you get into what Ted was saying about, we've got all this data that we collected. Somebody's gonna wish they had that at some point, maybe in a year, maybe in 20 years, but we definitely don't wanna just throw it away. So, so that continues to be a challenge. We end up just archiving it somewhere, and then we use GIS as a tool to be a repository for the data we have. So it's, GIS layers can house all kinds of data and data about data. So, that's where we've got like polygons. You go to a geographical area and we've got polygons, and then you click there and then you can see what you have. You've got point cloud data, you've got utility record data, you've got plans, you've got an old project, property lines. So we use GIS as a tool to manage what we have and where we have it.
So you use GIS kind of a layer over your data to find it.
Yep.
So to speak.
The data doesn't live in the GIS, but okay. There's polygons representing the
Pointers,
area.
So to speak.
All right, and then it'll point to, if it's a PDF, maybe you can pop that open. If it's a point cloud, maybe it tells you where you can find it. Mm-hmm. So really just a place to manage where you can get the data, and then figuring out how to use it again. That's going to be the next step.
Also, going down the line here, how do you guys handle it? Is it all on your desk?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, we have our own standards for archival. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
we have our own standards for archival, but as far as putting it, I guess I'm going to answer this through a lens of a recent convert to enterprise. It's very helpful to be able to geographically show clients where the point cloud data is. I feel like the more accessible you make it, then the more people are going to want you to go back into it, and you get extra value from, oh, hey, can you get this, lamppost, the height of it, or something that's non-traditional, you can go back in. But the trick is making it very easy for people to see and digest that information.
Too much sharing. See, you went a little too far. I was going to ask this question, but that's okay. That's good.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Really
Christine answered so well. I had to continue to talk.
You segued perfectly to the next slide, but they're perfect. So, Matt, what about you guys? How are you handling all your data?
Very similar to the other two. One of the things that we're working on is creating the framework for an infrastructure to be more of a collaborative data environment, a single depository for everything through, and then govern the life cycle of the actual data from start to any renewal data, any additional LiDAR imagery. And then one of the benefits with McKim and Creed is we do have in-house engineering, so we're able to work through the framework with the designers as well, so that we're not having two different silos of information. We're looking at how do we have that common data environment, work collaboratively on both sides of the coin, pre and post design or during design. So we're still working out what that governance looks like, and then focusing heavily on the metadata. You know, you guys both, everybody mentioned a little bit of the metadata. How are we ensuring that the horizontal vertical datums match, any new information meets the quality standards of what we're have existing, and then you know, just continue to write that next chapter, because it's dynamic. It's going to continue to evolve.
And what's happening is when you hear there's I think that's what's been happening. We have a new position we're coming out with. I don't know if we developed it, but essentially it's happening. You have a geospatial administrator, really, and then you kind of see it's a full-time job to actually all this data that's coming in, make sure it's where it is and be responsible for it, so to speak, and be answerable. So it's actually kind of flowing through. Is that true? I mean, or is that kind of how there's somebody in charge of this somewhere?
I'll tackle that. So you have kind of multiple different tiers. You have your data users, your stewards. So your stewards kind of govern it. Your users are your day-to-day, your extractors, the folks that are hands-on. And then you have the folks that are creating the architecture, the visionary, understanding what the client's needs are. So you have those different structures of the pyramid to help identify where the data needs to go and how it's managed. So it's
okay, cool. So let's go to the second part of this. Going to move forward, and that was already really. I think that was worth. It's already worth coming for this. This is really good. Great answers. You guys are doing great. You're making me look good. So the second part is a strategy crucial for any organization that uses data to drive business growth, make important decision making, and is a source of successive outcomes in a competitive market. Okay. So the question is, how effectively, and I'm going to ask you just to think about it, is it, and be a little reflective and a little self-critical. You know, are you using your data as effectively as possible through its life cycle? And how are you using it now? Could it be better? And then maybe we approach it that way. Christine, you want to start again? And
yeah, sure. The answer is no, we're not using it, not nearly to its potential. It's there, and we're trying to work towards that. It's a lot of theory. It's a lot of what we should be doing, but we're in a very the geospatial industry is growing. It's like we've got a little piece of this pie, but the pie itself is getting bigger, and we're busy doing work. So yeah, we've got to take a step back and say, well, we have to manage this correctly. But I can give you an example of using data to make a business decision. My company had 3 offices in New York. When we only had 1 office and we were thinking about adding a second office, we're trying to figure out where to put it. We were on Long Island in New York, and it was like, well, maybe we just go about 100 miles north, just jump to the other side of New York City. But my partner, who was very geospatial data savvy, he found free data that showed where New York State Department of Transportation was putting their dollars by project. And he brought it into GIS and made a heat map. And of course, New York City glows the brightest, most work going on in New York City. But the next brightest spots were Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. So we were like, well, maybe it makes more sense to go to the other side of New York State, go to Rochester, Buffalo area, because there's a lot going on there, rather than just bunny hopping to the other side of New York City. We're already servicing that area. So based on that data, we decided to set up a Rochester office in 2017, and we've got 37 people super busy in that office now.
Wow. Good story. That was great. And so you used GIS, I guess it'd be GIS data, right, to make these decisions. So you drew these decisions. What about the data you have and all these hard drives and things? And maybe, Russ, you want to get that?
Make sure the mic's close.
Yeah.
I think we could do a better job, absolutely. It's really about getting it into everyone's hands and making it more accessible. just so that there's more people that know that this data exists and that they could use it. Outside of, you know, you're hired to do a job for this person, and you scan it, but even if it's internal, maybe for site civil, but does the transportation engineers know? Does the LA group, do they know? You know, all these other groups, do they know we have this data? Does the client know that we have a point cloud? Make it very easy for them so that they want us to go back. That's really what you want, right? You want to be able to go back to the data because you already have that fixed cost of going to acquire it, register it. So it's like every time you go back into it, it's profit, right?
Yeah, exactly. And well, that's what I'm thinking too. When I think about these things, I always say, okay, I'm Joe Engineer and I don't know where this data came from. Or I don't know anything about it. They just gave me something to do and I need something. What do I do? Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm going to take a couple of steps back. I think a lot of it stems from the procurement process of bringing the work. You're getting paid to do a certain thing. That data is collected and only used for that. So it's maybe take a look at what we could do with that procurement environment, the owners, the end users, what they're going to do with that database of information versus just a static MicroStation file or AutoCAD file. So
that's an excellent point. You segued into tomorrow's presentation for me, but that's really good. No, this is really exciting for me because you're actually hitting the topics going through my head, you know, and our heads respectively. You're right, there has to be a business model that works. And we'll talk a little about that later, but let's go. Okay, so a strategy, Okay, so we have here in the last part of it, there's a strategy that, data governance is a strategy that manages risk, reduce costs, and execute business objectives effectively. Like Christine talked about using it for this business objective, where to put your office. But I think, you know, I don't want to belabor that because we're actually getting to, you actually kind of got to hit it, that there's some problem, let's say the next challenge is really I think in the business perspective, or what was called the operational model or the financial model, coming from our friends at the DOT or any municipality. It's like, I just say, it costs money to answer the phone. That's really where it comes down to, you know, and they don't kind of realize that, you know, and you know, so so that has to be something that we have to talk about collectively. And so anyway, so moving on, I think, you know what, I'm going to go back and just, maybe I'm going to solicit a question if anybody at this point in data governance, does anybody have anything that you might want to add? How is your company, you know, tackling this problem? Any questions for our panelists? Or you all got hard drives under your desk? You can say that too. Here's a gentleman, yeah?
Some of us do have multiple hard drives when we're getting into sharing this data or setting this data up for police agencies and stuff. So they need secure servers, they need secure access, and even the office needs to be 100% secure. So it's just another use of this data, but it's a very high level of who has access to it and when. So they're only not multiple hard drives under the desk, but multiple hard drives in different rooms that are isolated.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Or
Yeah.
forensics
So there's data governance. Well, there's data governance protocols. That's data governance, right? And there's protocols for specific, you know, market issues, and that makes sense, you know. And that's actually, you know, that's relevant. You really, well, it kind of actually, what you're saying there too is there's this notion, who's heard of like the truth model that a little bit in the industry, everybody's putting out, it's going to be the digital twin, which is going to be all data that you're going to go look at and collect, and everybody's going to like happily go there and get it. Has anybody heard of that? And you're going to use it, and all the engineers, and he nods his head, and then yeah, I mean, don't worry about that. I don't think that's ever going to happen really well.
Some of it's actually for forensics and stuff like that too. For
forensics, yeah, if you're doing that kind of stuff. But even then, you need somebody with some qualifications to go and extract things out of it, especially if you're, well, forensics, if you know, somebody's going to go to jail for it, you want to know it's right? So anyway, okay. So let's talk about, moving on, and it's basically the segue to the next topic. Digital twin production. So you have a production process. This is the TopoDOT production process, but if you look at it, it's very it's very generic. Oh, these are all the things you have to do. I don't know if this is going to come up. Yeah, there it is. So the orange over here is basically your external system, right? So we don't care where our data comes from, right? We just say, we'll just basically establish metrics and basically analyze it. But this is what happens. There's data out here somewhere. There's a control survey that feeds it or not. You have acquisition. There's a system level process tied with every scan. Let's talk scanners. Every scanner has a system level process that basically organizes the data, orients it, puts it in the right place in the world. Once you're moving back at the TopoDOT process, which is all in the green, how do you organize that data? How do you assess it, its quality, make sure it's going to meet your requirements? And then the extraction, which it's all the sexy stuff that you guys are here to learn. How do you get all your digital twins out, whatever they happen to be, or your analysis or whatever. So, and then just someone put, a lot of people don't really realize there's model reprojection. If you get mobile data, you can actually move the data. If you move the data, like scale it, move it later, different datum, whatever, you can move all your extracted stuff automatically. So if that's ever going to happen to you, or you want to run your process that way, let us know. But because make sure you can call us, we'll tell you how to set that up right so it works really well. And then basically give your digital twin and you get it out. So you have this production process, you're working on it. You can always make it better, you come back and learn new tools. But you've delivered your digital twin, you've got your data, now let's look at it from that perspective. Now what? You're sitting there, like Professor Topo, not necessarily hard drives, but the figurative hard drive that's in the cloud that's just sitting there with all this data on it. Typically, show of hands, who's using Amazon Azure to store your data or something similar? And yeah, a couple, okay. So everybody that didn't raise their hand, just basically local servers. All right, don't all jump at once. Okay, good, all right, good. It's coming at me, okay, all right. So what I want to talk the next time is about collaboration, because there's two reasons. Collaboration for me, it's not collaborating with each other, but it's also collaborating with your partners, your customers. And the question is really, if you look at it, and it's a little cartoon here, it's you have this data and it can go to survey. You collaborate with other survey teams, other survey environments. You collaborate with assessment of quality, so it's pretty much your engineers, your inspectors of some sort, your who could it be? Anybody in a DOT looking at quality, referencing, what's the right word, Paul? Just quality assessment of your performance of your road, performance of your construction. Was it done correctly? Whatever. Engineering, obviously, there's uses in there, and there's GIS. So you can get all those places. So the question I have here is, there's a life cycle for this data, and you think, is your data value, the inherent value, the value in it, is it being exploited through the project life cycle? So we'll start from the left side this time, since Matt's always going last.
I appreciate that. So, I mean, the data life cycle is only as good as the existing conditions remain the same. Mm-hmm. So it's in a roadway perspective, if there's new construction, any kind of resurfacing, your data is no longer, it's at the end of its life cycle. So you got to renew that life cycle, rescan, reintegrate all that information. Mm-hmm. So the digital twin is not a static thing. It's going to be that dynamic component that keeps moving. And the goal is to work with the engineering and other different departments to add additional metadata into that. Add your sensors, your counts, your average daily traffic, everything else, the timing of the lights, the life cycle of the asphalt, if there's rutting or cracking on concrete, that kind of stuff. So is it being exploited? No, because I'm going to go back to the contracting process. Mm-hmm. It only goes, it's very segmental. It's not a continual cycle. And we got to keep renewing that information and rescanning, recapturing that stuff.
Yeah, and we had talked about this before, and Matt, so you, and a couple times you bring up the, was it basically, what is it, traffic flow, things like that, that you're going to add to these models. But I'm going to ask, is this real? Is this what we do, or we just feed those operations, or do we feed like downstream simulation modelers that take our geospatial information? I mean, from our perspective, I'm thinking, and I might be wrong about it, do we just say, okay, we just tell them there's a road here, here's where the lanes are, and by the way, there's a light here, and that's what we tell them. The metadata comes from like someone you're feeding downstream. Is that an operation outside of geospatial, you think, or?
It could be both. I mean, I think right now it's a little bit in between who owns that process. I think if you're working in a common data environment, both entities own the environment, own the data. So why not work collaboratively to figure it out?
Well, yeah. I mean, and there's expertise in what's the right word? Road traffic simulation that, you know, a geospatial guy may not know, right? So you have to kind of do that. Christine, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're definitely on the geospatial side traditionally thinking of ourselves as feeding the softwares that do the analyzing, but I think the way that, like, you know, smartphones became popular, you've got computers in your pockets now. I think we're moving towards that where, like, the simulation can happen sooner in the process, right? And or especially as software gets better and as software handling bigger data sets gets better. Yeah, so I think that, you know, our data mostly feeds those systems. I think the engineers still want to do the analyzing, and because what's the end goal, right? They want to build something or they want to fix something.
Right.
But building on Matt's point about, like, so we have this data, we feed some system, then they build something. Where we're headed is let's update the original digital twin so that it can be used for the next project, whether that's maintenance, continuous maintenance, or whether it's, you know, another improvement that needs to be made down the road. And, like, you know, the time that passes in between often kills the ability to use that data set. But I think that, like, you know, this is a room full of people who are on the technical side, and, you know, as we all go through our careers, you know, we have to look for those opportunities to reuse data and put it in a format that is going to be findable, like Russ was talking about.
I mean, yeah, so it questions, I mean, I think the other question is kind of pull, like, you need requirements to know if your data is useful. And we kind of like, we can't know all these things. I mean, I don't know traffic simulations. I kind of, from another life, I used to do orbit simulations. So I kind of get what they might do. But the thing is, I don't know. But there has to be requirements from us. I mean, somebody's got to feed those requirements. So how might those requirements come down in, Russell, it's like in your world? How do you hear from your clients, like they say, okay, you've got data, can you do this for me? Does that even happen? Or you just deliver it and it stays?
Yeah, no, ideally that happens every time, right? That's the goal.
Ideally? Tell us a little more. How does it happen? So you
want to make an environment where you foster that to happen, right? You want that to happen. So how do you do that? You have to make things accessible for people. You have to make it easy. Just like if you have a website and it requires you to create a password, or if you could just hit a button and say, you know, log in with Apple, right? Whichever, the easier, the path of least resistance. So you don't want to have people, ideally, not have to install anything or anything like that, right? You just.
So how are you doing this? Are you doing this at Langen, or is this just ideally? You said ideally
We're
two times, so what do we do?
No, I mean, ideally, every job, people will come back and ask you to get more, right? I mean, outside of the original scope. Right now, we're actually using it with the TopoShare Enterprise.
Okay, all right. Well, I didn't mean to pull that out of you.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I mean, it's a little pitch, but we've been thinking about this for a long time. But the bottom line is, but the thing that really to get out of that is that, and it actually comes back to I think one of the real problems that I'm going to talk about tomorrow a little bit more is, like, ideally, it would be great if they keep coming back, but, you know, I think what's missing in the old business model too is that it costs money to do this, you know, and it's like, you know, it's you know, if you don't, and a lot of the DOTs might say, well, okay, yeah, I'll go. You give them a path to ask you, and they'll ask you, and then go, okay, it's 2 and 3 hours of somebody's time if it's a simple question of really kind of getting an analysis out. So are you getting paid? Have you got a model working that you're reimbursing your geospatial guys to kind of go back into that data and getting it out, or is it just,
absolutely.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
And to your original question about getting all the value out of the point cloud, right? It'd be like if you and Paul had a company, right? And you were civil, he was transportation, and I scanned a roadway for you. Now he wants MUTCD codes, right, for signs. It's one thing when you tell people like, oh, I scanned it, right? But they don't always understand what that means. And it's like you show them a point cloud and they're like, oh, you have everything. Like you have everything. So I think it's important to put, like you said, it's geospatial data, so you can see it. I think it's important to put that in front of
So
it.
it's kind of on us to get it out there. Our clients don't know that it exists. So
Right.
how do we, it's part business development, it's part, technical, it's part hand-holding, but it's like, how do we get it out there that this stuff exists? Can you go to one website? Maybe if we could, in an ideal world, get it's all in TopoShare, and anybody in the world can go to TopoShare and see what's there and if that's useful. How do we tell everybody that
Right.
TopoShare exists? There's always a messaging and a visibility side.
It's even difficult just internally at bigger companies. Like how do you tell
We're
all
in
the
this
groups that
industry.
we have all that?
Not everybody knows.
And it's, the interesting thing is, and I took, you guys, you have to treat even your section, your geospatial, you have marketing concerns, even internally. You think you don't, you're a geospatial specialist. I don't have to market. Well, you do. You even have to market to your other departments. Otherwise, they just sit and they just do what they did the last 10 years. And, if that means calling up, and the other thing, there's this synchronization we talked about with models is, if you look at the definition, it's synchronized in fidelity and frequency, right? So as Matt pointed out, time goes by and it's kind of like not as valuable anymore, or it's different. But the bottom line is, I forgot exactly what I was going to say about that. I don't know, but it was going to be profound. It'll come back to me. But I don't know. It was really good too. I don't know, we're going to move on. This happens. You get old. It's hard. So anyway, your data exploited through lifecycle. But this is really good because the issue is really where that data is, and if you need, and it needs to be, it's this business model where you got to come back and say, how do you make this a win-win for both sides? You get the information you need faster, better, cheaper than you would have, but the geospatial guy on the other side is going, okay, well, we get paid for this because this is what we do and this is what we know. And that's kind of missing in the whole thing. So anyway, we'll talk about that later too, a little tomorrow. And then the last one is a little add-on. How do you collaborate with internal, external partners? And I think we kind of hit that a little bit. But do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, Ted, I'll add to that. So on more complex roadway projects, let's say you have a concrete mapping or concrete rehabilitation where the rigid pavement are a bunch of squares. And each individual square is treated differently in the design and in maintenance process. We're actually sitting shoulder to shoulder, having the engineers either come to our office or help them get a license to TopoDOT so they could view the imagery and LiDAR in their actual design file. So it's actually bringing it one step forward where you're almost in that collaborative data environment working on the same files. And we've had a couple different engineering firms love that approach, and it allows them to accelerate their design schedule because they can see everything and determine, hey, this needs replacement. If it needs replacement, don't worry about extracting the rest of it. Okay, these need repaired. Hey, can you give me all the crack widths and everything else for these different pieces?
That's a really significant example of collaboration, right? Because the nice part is, if you go in, a lot of times they'll go and say, okay, model everything so I can look at your model and see what's not right. Well, if you can give them kind of data and give them just some basic knowledge, and they can say, well, okay, don't even worry about these guys. They're gone. We're going to replace them. All of a sudden, you're optimizing the modeling process because no one had the whole going back to the old idea of the truth model and the sorry, my back's been to all you guys for a while. Basically, going back to this thing of the truth model that I think some of our friends in the software industry was saying, and I've looked at. Not that it was just Bentley, but it was the others. But anyway, but they would go in and say, okay, we're all going to go access this model. And it works in the design world. And this is what you have. For design, it kind of makes sense because everything's virtual and it snaps and it's perfect and it's all about the design. It doesn't exist yet, really. It's the real world that we deal with that data, it's got a lot of uncertainty in it, right? It all depends on what your datum is, what depends on did you have control, and control's expensive, and or did you just run your mobile LiDAR over it? It's changing all the time, and there's a lot of stuff you don't want. There's vegetation, there's things that are just noise, right? So, and then it takes skill. And you guys are all here because you can't just go into a point cloud and measure. I mean, please, the one message you can take back to all your management, the guys, is if you're going to just So anybody that believes they can put a point cloud out, just take a bridge of a point, just take a point cloud or a bridge and ask the person to get the clearance and measure. Ask 5 engineers to measure. They will get 5 different measurements of the clearance. If they're within 3 feet, I'd be shocked. So it's not as easy, and that's why we're here, right? We know it's not that easy. But I think what we do is, in this collaboration, we got to find a place that we fit in and can exploit and actually can move down to other levels in the engineering where there's real value, to be honest. So we'll, again, that's kind of, don't want to take all the wind out of my sails for tomorrow, but that's what I want to talk about. So that's all we had. Let me see what the time is, 11. We're getting down a little early, so we have some time for questions. Is there anybody that wants to talk about? There's another gentleman here, Paul.
I hear this guy's.
Yeah, I know. He's got.
I'm not the one. One of our other guys should have been here. We actually have a system for this. We call it MJ4D, where we do share and collaborate the data. We host it ourselves. And some of you guys are familiar with it. The clients are able to just see this on any web browser without any additional installs or softwares. And then we're layering that data in the 4th dimension. So the data is not static. So we can see this over a time frame, and they can see how the data is layered on top of each other. Even some of the DOT requirements down in New York City are requiring monthly scans as the infrastructure is going up. So we've got foundation plans, we got utilities and interiors, and 2Ds and 3Ds of the data being extracted and stored throughout the project.
Well, that's interesting. See, in a browser environment, you're seeing data. Is it point cloud, pure point cloud data, or is it just kind of like, was it extracted data, extracted models?
No, most of it is point cloud. So a lot of it's just 360 photos and
panorama
and stuff like that. So with our 4D systems, so you can walk through the site, capture look at the 360, zoom in, measure that data, cut sections, and we're layering all kinds of spatial data together. Mobile mapping, LiDAR from drones, static LiDAR, mobile LiDAR. So we bring as much information as we can. Walk through the buildings, we can see insides, see the outside exterior walls, and just capture as much data as we can and layer that as is needed. From construction projects and throughout the entire construction projects. And they can store this to see maybe why something went wrong. Was that lane not wide enough, or was there not enough material under there? And then they can add other information to it as they need it.
That's really fascinating. I want to learn more about that, really, because that's a solution. I mean, it sounds like, and I don't know how point cloud, because I know inherently when I've seen the point cloud and data viewers, they're quite expensive to run, and it's just to spin around in a point cloud and the like. So to put in a browser and things. Oh, I see. Okay. Interesting. Yes.
How are you dealing with terabyte-sized files over the cloud? Are you working on it in the cloud, or are you bringing that local and that workflow?
So how we're working on it, and I'm going to ask, well, okay, so I don't want to ignore my panelists here too. So how are you guys working with with terabyte?
So we currently chop it up and put it on, I guess what we call basic, right?
TopoShare basic, yeah.
So and we've actually collaborated working with it. It's really nice using that tool. You take these tiles, we'll take these tiles, that. But yeah, chopping it up, it's the best for collaborating and for putting all your data on the Glacier, or I'm sorry, AWS, and then distributing it that way, the imagery in the cloud. Yeah, because otherwise it would be painful.
Matt, anything else to add, or Christine?
Yeah, we're testing out quite a bit of remote cloud-based extraction as well as all cloud-based processing, doing everything virtually. So there's some workflows, there's limitations. Different softwares have some limitations on it. It's got to be a localized machine, but there's some workflows. It can be clunky at times, but yeah, there's ways to do both.
I mean, from the TopoDOT perspective, you guys have to get TopoShare Basic with your, and they've talked about it. Our approach is that typically 80% of what you do when you're acquiring data, you're going to organize that data in some way. You're going to tile it and the like, and you know, because that's how we work within it. It's very effective, even to take it from your own hard drive, right? So basically, when I said data is organized, we send it up to wherever in TopoShare base. You send it up to whatever cloud you'd like. It doesn't matter. And so there's practically no limitation that way, and you guys know how that works, and your new people will be learning that. But the bottom line is, we do everything we do in like the TopoShare world is file-based data transfer. So it's just click on the tiles you need, download them. We don't care how long it takes. Cached. Next time they come up in seconds. So, and when you're done with them, delete them. They're still up in the cloud. The thing that we're the niche we're fitting in is this data governance thing where we don't we don't actually compete with anything else, to be honest, with all the data viewers and the fancy stuff. To run anything from a server seems to be, if I'm looking at all the prices and all, it's like, you know, 100 times more expensive. It's just, and that's no reflection on the margins. It's very expensive to do that. And then sometimes, you know, there's also that provenance, like, what was that data? What was the metadata with it? Where was the control? Is it controlled? You know, all that stuff that you really want to keep individual projects as they are, and then feed everything else. So that's where TopoShare fits into that, if that answered your question. And terabytes doesn't matter. Our biggest Topo user, DRMP, they've probably, I don't know, they've got almost 1,000 projects, a lot of mobile stuff. I mean, it's way into petabytes. It's not a problem. They can go to a laptop and just click and find an intersection. Just download a file in a minute. So so it works. It's just organized, you know. Any other questions? No? Oh, hand up. A couple hands.
Is TopoShare similar to GIS, where it's mapped out like in a top view, like you can click on it that way?
The question, short answer is yes, exactly like that. So your projects come up, and I mean, there's a TopoShare class, and we've been more than happy to show you, you know, but the bottom line is, and as Christine was saying earlier, they use a GIS overlay too, because this is the way you want to look for geospatial data. The thing about we've done is just, we said, okay, but it's not just your point cloud data, it's just metadata, so it's the control that went with that project. It can be contracts that went with that contract. It's just everything that existed with that contract you can go find. And you can just click and get it, you know?
Then second question, you said sitting down with like engineers and going through, you know, pavement analysis. Through my experience of sharing point clouds with engineers, they're still so used to line work and traditional sheets. How have you helped engineers recognize point cloud data? And because they look at it and they go, I don't know what this is.
Great question. Bring them to your office. I know I say that in jest, but seriously, have them come sit next to you at your computer with some folks that really understand it, and then show them some of the templates and how to generate that stuff. But when I use the example of rigid concrete, if you have 12,000 panels of concrete to review, historically they do it in the field. If now they could have their entire design staff sit at a desk and review it with very high resolution imagery to determine what to do with the concrete, it significantly reduces their risk exposure, sun exposure. It's going to be, what, 98 this week?
Oh, yeah.
Lovely.
Go Florida.
And yeah, so it's a pretty easy buy-in when they sit next to you and you're the driver. You drive the files and then show them what the data is. I think Christine mentioned that. It's just letting people know what information we have. So that's half the battle. So I would just invite them to the office and have them sit next to us.
And that's interesting. I think, you know, the inviting to the office, I mean, I would say I wouldn't say critical, it's just limited because they have to invite them to your office. So scaling that is a little tough unless you had a really big office.
I'm a BD guy, Ted.
Oh, that's
so I want them in my office.
In my office, good. You know, but to your point, there is, I think to your point, really, you get a little further in that you have to give them information they can ingest. It can't take too long, and it can't be too difficult to understand. Not that engineers aren't smart, you can't ask them, hey, go learn how to do point clouds, by the way. You know, this isn't going to work. One of the aspects of TopoShare, too, in the enterprise thing is just we actually, from mobile images, you can actually go into a microstation environment, they can click and get the image down. So they could actually do that themselves, which is slick. And we just put our image, you guys have seen our image tool where you find the image. Well, they can do that and it's free, they just put them in and that's fine. But the other side too is that's kind of where we're, again, just show them where that data is and have them communicate with you. And that's the TopoShare Enterprise experience where you just kind of like click and email you and go, I need this. I don't know how to get it. I don't care. Just give me this analysis. And you talk to them because there's requirements that they're not sharing with you. You got to like, and they don't understand what you do exactly. So they just tell you and you say, okay, this is what you're going to need and this is what I do. So it's about the collaboration, it's about communication, you know, more than sharing data, to be honest. It's about communication, setting up the communication. So, and then from the communication, you can get requirements and then meet their requirements in a quality controlled manner, actually, I'll add.
So as a mobile mapping manager, I've kind of been in the talks with doing the framework and saving some of this point cloud data and talking with IT and setting up what that would look like. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest questions that's always stumped us is, well, how long is it relevant? Like, do we rescan a site? Should we save it for 2 years, 5 years? And that always seems to be a roadblock where we're not really sure. Like maybe we need it for 5 years, maybe 8. I just want to hear your thoughts on relevance of the LiDAR data.
Okay.
You mean like to delete it? To get rid of it? Never, 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 ever.
Storage is cheap.
Just like a survey plan, you keep it forever. You never get rid of it. I'm not saying you have to have the hard, you know, what is it on an FTP? Is it, you know, is it on a hard drive? I don't know what that is for individual companies, but yeah, you can't get rid of data, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we've struggled with this also, and it's like, you know, you have to ask yourself, is anyone ever going to want to look at that? And like, it's sometimes you think the answer is no, delete it, but you know, there's been plenty of times where like you find something 40 years old in your office and you're like, this is so cool, this is what it looked like 40 years ago, and like, there's going to be a use case for that, whether it's like for planning, environmental, historical. I just think like I'm agreeing with Russell that like, you know, storage is cheap, software is getting better at handling the storage for us. So just put it somewhere and focus on a way to archive it so it's accessible, so that you know it exists.
The problem with these new mobile scanners is they make a ton of data.
Yeah, no, a ton. I mean, there's a practical side, and I don't know if the IT guys are going to go, oh yeah, keep it forever. You know,
I could add
there's
one
an
thing
issue
to that, Ted, too, because I know you're thinking about the economics of it too, probably. And when you think about accessing data, it costs money to keep it accessible. But once you get beyond the life, maybe it's 5 years or 7 years, you can move it into like a glacial storage. So it's like probably 1/10 of what it was costing before. And that reduces that long-term cost. That way you're not throwing it away, but you've got it in a really cheap, like glacial type of AWS thing. So something to think about, like tiering your data by age.
Yeah. Also, part of the governance process is look at what you can, if you need to depart with some of your data, look at what you absolutely cannot release and delete, and look at some of the intermediate steps of information where you may have some duplicates. The other thing I advise, check your contract, check your state statutes. There are some laws and contractual restrictions on your data. Review that first. But I do agree with them, keep it cold storage, all that kind of stuff, it's cheap.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, when we get to TopoShare too, the process, we build it for, the ultimate process for like storage, AWS, Oracle now too, and Azure, thank you. You know, so the bottom line is, you're so much flexibility, I just realized, you know, because we used to go to the DOTs and say, it has to be on our system. Now it's like, no, we got blobs and stuff everywhere because they figured it out. The ID guys can't keep up with the security. They can't keep up with the storage. They can't keep up with the infrastructure. There's no other way to do it, really. But to your point, if you have that file-based system and you go, okay, well, this is old. Well, if you put it in Glacier, you're not losing it. It doesn't cost much. And if it takes a couple days to get back, if you ever need it, no big deal, right? So that makes IT people happy. They just say, well, this is where they put it, right? You know, it's not a big deal. If that answers your question, I think, because Yeah, I mean, you never know when you're going to need it. But I just want to come up, I'll just give you, since we're talking a little economics, we happen to get, back in the day, we got our hands on Geiger mode data for Pinellas County, which is 7 terabytes of, it's not a big county, but it's kind of like, you know, it's on the West Coast. And it's about 50 points per square meter over an entire county with, you know, 7 terabytes. It's still there, and it's in hot data. We can get you any tile you want on it. You know, you can just click on it and get it. And it's costing, I don't know, $19 a month to store. So, and that's, is that hot data? I don't know if the other one's cold, that's hot, I don't know, whatever. But it's anyway, accessible data. So, you know, nobody's going to get too upset about that. And that's very workable. So again, you can delete it, and it's self-optimizing. So anybody in the in desktop side downloading data, you can always get rid of it because you just download it again if you want it, right? So you cache it there and use it, and then just get rid of it so you don't worry about your desktops.
Are you keeping raw data? I mean, how good, or are you just keeping the final product, the LAS file? It feels like, you know, raw C10 data from a firmware that's 15 years old or 20 years old at this point. The software to process it basically doesn't exist anymore.
Ask these guys. I don't,
What do you mean? You don't have a version
of
of Cyclone 4.82 laying around?
Hell no.
You know, we had to retire our C10 for the same reason. I am a big believer of keeping the raw and the full mission, cold storage, and then on our workflow is with the TopoShare Basic. That's where the LAS and the imagery, like the finished products, always live. So they're kind of they're separate.
I agree with that. And the other cool thing, because I believe you asked earlier about, you know, the cloud processing, things like that. You can store multiple versions of software easier on a cloud machine than you can locally, especially at different state kits. If you're working across a large geography, I mean, those things you could put anything on there. It's
So, Leica doesn't allow virtual machine.
There's limitations.
Okay. Well, is there any other questions? This is going really well. I appreciate all the input. Paul, we got a couple more minutes before we let you guys all go to lunch.
Get your steps in.
Yeah, they just don't like it.
What, lunch is now ready? Not ready, okay.
Let's keep
talking.
So how do you make that old information discoverable for somebody in the future that's maybe looking for that historical data? Would it be on like a website somewhere where someone can easily find it, or maybe, I don't know.
I would say, let's think about Google Earth, right? When did Google Earth come into play? 2000, what?
I think.
1999.
Oh, yeah, so I think we all started using it regularly in the late 2000s. Like definitely when I started my career, if I wanted to do a proposal for a survey, I had to go out in the field and look at it and take pictures. And then like, you know, then all of a sudden this thing, Google Earth, appears, right? And it's like, and people are saying, look, there's satellite photos of everywhere. And then I looked at them, it's not satellite photos, that's regular aerial ortho imagery that Google put all together, right? So like, so 25 years ago, that didn't exist, and now it does. So what we're talking about is we need to make that thing exist. It doesn't exist yet. The medium to go in and say there's LiDAR data or 3D data or whatever kind of data, geospatial data for this, it's who's gonna make that platform? And like we've got an opportunity to, because we are the people collecting the data and curating the data and delivering the data. But if we don't, Google will, and maybe they will, and maybe they'll have a good platform that we can feed, or maybe TopoShare is going to be the thing that everybody in the whole world is using, right? But yeah, we definitely need to, it's got to be web-based, it's got to be easy to access, it's got to be free or close to free. If it's free, people will definitely use it. If it's, you know, but yeah, Google Earth is still free, surprisingly.
Well, TopoShare is free now.
Yeah, TopoShare. You guys are killing me. Okay. Well, TopoShare isn't expensive, but the bottom line is, I tell you what, TopoShare will kind of do what you want. They really will. Because a lot of times what we do is, it's not a viewer, so we're not basically, TopoShare just gives you metadata about your line work, and then you take raster images of the data, so somebody can go in very inexpensively, fractions of a penny mostly, and just kind of say, oh, there's stuff here. And then all I have to see, and then you just say, well, there's the raster of the point cloud over a road on a Google map, and then you go, okay, and you click and they find you 6 years from now, or, and say, oh, hey, you have this data? And then you can talk to them. And you actually, it's an access, look, it's a business development question too, which I'll go a little more to tomorrow, but it really is. I mean, you got all this data, it's worth something, and there's information in there. It'd be nice to get paid for what you have and what you know. So that's kind of what we're trying to do.
I think the idea of like, let's say we had all of the property lines for all of New York City. And like you hear, like the surveyors don't want that to happen because then they'll be out of a job if you can just go to a website and get the survey. But I think that's completely wrong. I think if we solved all the problems on the boundary, then someone's going to say, let's do this for every gas main in New York City, or there's always going to be another problem to solve, another data set to collect and make usable. If a doctor cures cancer, there's another thing to cure, right? So there's always another thing to do. So I think like the people in this room need to be thinking that way. Like, let's get all that data accessible, let people use it, and we can move on to the next challenge.
Well said, and that's actually true.
Well said.
Because if you're sitting there trying to like stay in the old system, whatever it happens to be, because you don't want it to change, you better be towards the end of your career and just kind of hanging on, because that's not the way to to position yourself for the future, really. There's always something that comes up. 2 minutes, 3 minutes? All right. Well, I think that was a great discussion. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much. It's really appreciate the time. And I know you had to come all the way from Claremont, Christine, and then New Smyrna Beach, and from Orlando. You guys came a long way, but we appreciate it. And New York, that's true. Oh, that's right. I already have you living here, Christine.
Yeah. I'm retired.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for all your great questions. Really appreciate the conversation. I hope you find it useful. Talk to us about any of this later. Look at some of our solutions there. Others, do what you can do. Thank you, guys. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.
You guys.